This is the McGraw Show on KTRS.
Big 550 KTRS. Louder I scream doesn't work. I got to turn the microphone on. That's how it works after all these years. Somebody came up to me the other day and said, hey, how about talking about mental health? And I said, boy, it's about time we need to talk about mental health in this country because of all the reasons we've talked about before. The crisis that's going on, the social media crisis, the children, they're dealing with it. No one wants to talk about it. There's a stigma attached to it. We're seeing world-class athletes get bullied. We're seeing world-class athletes not being able to compete in the Olympics because of the mental health. It is a huge issue, and no one likes to talk about it. So we said, you know what, let's take some time and dive into the topic. We'd like to welcome Dr. Paul Thomlinson. He's Executive Director of the Compass Health Research Institute. Doctor, welcome to Big 550 KTRS.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about Compass Health. What is it?
So Compass Health Network is a large integrated health system. We like to think of it. We provide behavioral health services, which you can think of as mental health, psychiatric, substance use treatment services. We provide primary care. We provide dental health care. We also have a psychiatric hospital in Windsor, Missouri. So we kind of cover the whole spectrum, and that's kind of one of our watchwords is integration, whole person care, because mental health is connected to physical health and vice versa.
Did you say dental?
Yeah, we also provide oral health care. Another area where there's some interesting interactions between mental health and oral health care. So we try to integrate mental health care into all aspects of health.
Now, you drive down Highway 40 at Clarkson. There's a building there that says Compass on the side. That's one of your offices? Or?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. We have offices in St. Peter's, St. Charles, Wentzville.
Did it get started here in St. Louis, or what? Give us a little history of how you got to where you are.
We're actually an amalgamation of organizations that have come together in the last 5 or 10 years or so. The old Kreider Center was the behavioral health center in this area, but we've also recently acquired integrated ADAPT of Missouri into our services. We're currently adding some services to the south of St. Louis, but we're kind of an amalgamation of several organizations that have merged over the last few years to really truly integrate care.
Mental health is such a gigantic topic.
Yeah, for sure.
And it has many different tentacles. And it shows up in many different ways.
For sure.
Just where I sit, and we have a text line that the second you think of something, you can text it right to me. And some of the things are very nice, but many of them are so hostile and so insensitive and rude that you would never say it to anybody to their face.
Right.
That's social media too, right?
100%.
Where I'm going to say the most vile things in the world to you. I'd never say them to you publicly or in person.
Yes.
Then when you respond, oh, I didn't even know you read these things.
Right.
I was just venting, right?
Yeah.
So it's taken on a life of its own.
For sure.
Have you seen clearly it's getting worse, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the stress level is off the charts.
It really is.
Yeah.
All the data point in that direction. And you're right. It's sort of the screaming into the void phenomenon that you see. But in social media, years of social psychology research have told us that when people have some sense of remove from the target of their aggression, they become on an order of magnitude more aggressive and so forth. But, it really is about, and it's also not necessarily a good idea because we also know that venting it can actually increase it. It can actually increase according to the so-called frustration aggression hypothesis. The more you do, the more you want to do. So it's not necessarily a good idea to just vent. Just venting may not be a great idea.
So getting it out or venting oftentimes makes it worse?
It can. Absolutely can. It can lead to actually physical aggression from just venting can come from folks that you would never expect it from.
Yeah.
So it's really important not to just vent. I think it's important to have some strategies for venting in a healthy way. And I don't think it's ever a great idea to just say whatever you want. I mean, that's a failure of emotional intelligence right off the bat.
Yeah.
Because self-control is one of those cornerstone emotional intelligence skills that some folks just lack.
I could only imagine what Compass Health is dealing with when it comes to parents calling about it for their teenagers.
Yeah. So, the ongoing youth mental health crisis, in 2021, Surgeon General, American Academy of Pediatrics, APA, all these folks declared a mental health emergency for youth. And you would think it was getting better with all the resources, in quotes, being put toward it, but there's really no sign that it's abating, and it may be getting worse. So we're still seeing, for example, and it's getting younger. So we're seeing folks, we had some data on folks who are showing up at the ER for suicidality, and it's getting younger and younger and younger.
What is suicidality?
So folks who have suicidal thoughts, intent, or plan showing up at the ER, that's the age group has gotten much younger for folks who are doing that.
And you equate that to, or the experts equate that to social media and all the things they're dealing with there?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely. I think the jury's still out on putting a finer point on it in terms of the data, but there's no question in my mind that social media and the accompanying behavioral kind of changes that have come along with that are in many ways to blame for that.
Yeah.
In an era where we should be, the tools are here to connect in a healthy way like we've never had before, and yet it ends up being many times just the opposite. It ends up being isolating. It ends up being, the whole FOMO thing. So people have this carefully curated version of themselves that they have online that nobody could ever live up to.
Yeah.
And it just makes people feel even more isolated, which I believe is one of the root causes of much of the epidemic of mental illness that we're seeing.
I experience it myself, and I'm a grown man who knows better. I know, right? I see someone having a good time at a concert or something, and I feel bad and guilty 100%. And jealous, and I know they had a bad time.
Exactly. Yeah. Where was my invitation?
Right.
Why didn't
Right. I didn't want to go, but you guys are having a good time. How come no one invited me? And then you feel bad for 3 days.
What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
What did I do?
But children, let's stay on children for a while. Because we all know the problem, right? I have a sister who raised a daughter before social media, and that same sister raised a daughter after social media, and she said it was like raising two different people in two different worlds. What do you tell parents? What do you tell kids? What give us some hints here?
Yeah, so I think, and we're seeing across the country some folks actually taking it seriously and trying to intervene, because we are we're all sick of the word unprecedented, but that's where we are historically. Right. These things are unprecedented. They have no precedent, so we don't know what the impact is yet. But it's been equated to, for example, the early '60s when the studies came out on smoking, and what happened then? Well, they took it seriously and they began to regulate them, make sure that kids didn't have access to it. If you were going to get access to that, it was going to be because you were an adult and you could make your own decisions. But now we have kids clearly unprepared by virtue of their brain development, their emotional maturity, being bombarded with, being engaged with in incredibly manipulative, often nefarious ways by social media apps and companies and so forth. And we have got to take seriously the issue of how old do they need to be? What kind of maturity level do they need to have before they are given a phone, before they're given the most powerful supercomputer in the history of the world in the palm of their hand,
right,
that has its algorithms aimed directly at their frontal lobes, which are not yet developed? How old do you need to be for that to be okay? I can tell you it's not 8, 9, 10 years old, and we have to take more seriously.
So parents call you up and talk to you about this? Do you go in and do they bring the kids in to see you, and how does that work?
We see folks all the time asking questions about how do we do a better job of protecting our kids? How do we do a better job of dealing with the emotional aftermath, the downstream consequences of all these things? So, yeah, our therapists are constantly dealing with the fallout, if you will, from social media.
I have a 3-year-old, soon to be 3-year-old. I'm not in this world. Some of us say just tell the kid to take away the phone, turn off the phone, right?
Yeah.
Don't give the kid the phone.
Right.
It seems easy enough, but if it were that easy, they would do it.
100%. And, we live in a world where kids are, they need to have screen time. They, all the old recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics about screen time are just out the window because, how do you comport that with the whole, learning?
Right. Homework's online. Homework's on the books are online.
Everything's online. So we really have to get a better handle on the quality and content, quality of the content that kids are being exposed to, that they're engaging with. And there has to be parental oversight that many folks just aren't comfortable with. And I can tell you, I've got a 14-year-old daughter, and I am hopelessly out of touch. And I'm a pretty hip dad, but I'm just kind of out of touch with the relentless change in the content that they're being exposed to and the apps that they're using.
And
can't keep up.
The dings and the likes and all of that is addictive.
Yeah.
And it's like being addicted to
Dopamine
alcohol or drugs or gambling or
the brain research is fascinating on that, and there's really no difference. That whole idea, you just pointed it out, it's the exact same dopamine rush that you get from drugs of abuse. But I think that's also a good analogy, because I think it's really about looking for connection. When we think about drug abuse, there's all kinds of great thinking, and I think paradigm shifts that are happening with regard to substance use. It's not just about the drugs being addictive, et cetera. It's really about folks looking for something to connect with. And sometimes drugs, alcohol, are the only thing folks have to connect with. So that becomes the most important relationship in their life. Well, you have to give them an alternative.
Yeah.
And when you have a rich, nourishing, healthy, reciprocal relationship that you can develop with something other than alcohol, that makes all the difference in the world. And we have to provide that for kids. Kids have to learn strategies for connecting. It's not as natural as we'd like to think. We are social animals, but there's actually a whole science on, how we can help kids, adults, ourselves do better in terms of connecting with other people.
I know there's a lot of Dr. Paul Thomlinson is with us. He's the executive director of Compass Health Research Institute here in town and throughout the region. I know a number of parents whose children are well-adjusted, beautiful, engaged, popular, and they're in therapy.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's many, many kids in therapy, and there's a stigma to it, and there's not a stigma to it.
Yeah.
And
It's
how
both.
can these kids who have a perfect life somehow be on antidepressants or be in therapy when they're normal, everyday teenagers?
Yeah, it is a weird conundrum. It's a weird place we're in. We did a series of focus groups last year around the state with youth on youth mental health, and we heard both of those things. You nailed it. There's a stigma. There remains a stigma about mental health, mental illness, and going to the hospital can get you ostracized, and people don't know how to talk to you. But also, there's a bit of we heard very clearly, and not being pejorative when I say it, because we heard it directly from the kids' mouths, that there's a sense of a race to see who's got more mental health challenges, and how do we posture that. Again, social media. How do I present myself on social media so that I get more likes, more attraction, more sad reacts, more whatever, So yeah, we're in a very strange time where mental health among youth is both stigmatized and also in some ways kind of coveted.
Yeah.
It's weird.
When you and I were kids, we'd get bullied on the bus. We get bullied in the lunchroom. We do the bullying, right? We'd go home and we'd be in our safe place.
Yeah.
Right. And you would, I don't want to go to school tomorrow because the bully at the bus stop.
Right. Exactly.
But we had that downtime. We had our safe place.
Mm-hmm.
Now you get bullied at the bus stop. You go home and you go online, and now all the kids see you being bullied and continue to be bullied. And
Piling on.
It's a never ending for these children.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second.
Yes.
There's no safe place for these kids anymore.
No, that's you nailed it. There's this disembodied chorus of people, reminding them that they are worthless, from their perspective. Unfortunately, there are people. It's a sad fact, a sad truth that there are just people who seem to have their mission in life as making other people feel as bad about themselves as possible. Now that comes from their own deficits, probably, obviously, and their own mental health challenges in many cases, their own emptiness or whatever. And luckily, it's a small group of people, but they're awfully loud.
Yeah,
and they have the biggest megaphone in the history of the world. But safe place, I think, is also important. Back in the day, I think about that very thing, bullying. I had my whole network. I had big brothers, I had younger brothers, I had my dad. Folks I could, they got my back.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that. And being mitigated by this, again, as I said, the chorus
and we would
of
go
folks.
ride on a bike down the street and play softball and baseball, and we play in the creek, and I'm going to my friend Joey's house.
Yeah,
all those things, those touches.
Yep.
That interaction that we crave. We've taken that out and we've substituted it with this artificial.
100%. And that went down another road. I just did a talk in Kansas City. We'll be doing it in St. Louis, I think, in the fall. But it's on nature and neurodiversity, the mental health impact of exposure to nature. You just mentioned going out to the creek and riding your bike outside, and new studies on the impact of exercise on mental health and how it's like doubles the effectiveness of it when you exercise outside as opposed to inside, et cetera. So that's another thing. There's a great book that came out some years ago called Last Child in the Woods that talks about so-called nature deficit disorder. I think that's another huge thing, and we have enough research now to actually make recommendations for how much kids should be exposed. There's a dose response curve for exposure to nature that can do all kinds of things, including reducing the stress hormones, the cortisol levels, as it's called, in the bloodstream, increases their creativity, reduces their negative affect or emotion, etc. So we need also to make sure that our kids are getting exposed to green spaces and blue spaces on the regular, for at least. It's like there's a nature pyramid that kind of mirrors the food pyramid that we're all familiar with. There's like the daily veggies kind of thing. We all need to get outside and breathe fresh air, or fresh as we can get, every single day for at least 5-10 minutes. And then for example, on a weekly basis, make sure that you're getting outside for at least an hour or two, et cetera. Yeah. There's a whole literature on that I think parents need to get up to speed on.
I know myself, I'm a woodworker, and I've said this before on the radio, and I just sort of accidentally fell into woodworking. And I find myself working with my hands, but I also find that when I do it, the stress. I can feel the stress leave me. I can feel myself being revived. And you're working with your hands. You think about it, right? Man worked with their hands for millions of years. It's only been in the last 5 minutes of the world's time that we don't work with our hands anymore.
Well put. And a number of other things. Yeah, you're nailing it. So evolutionarily, in the history of the human race, we're in this blip. And things have changed so much that we have not been able to catch up on our diets. That's why there's so much trouble in terms of obesity, et cetera, because we're used to a scarcity for hundreds of thousands of years, and now all of a sudden you got 24/7. Even the poorest of countries have access to food all the time.
Right.
Just another example of there's a mismatch evolutionarily in terms of where we are, and it certainly has implications for us psychologically. Working with your hands, but you also mentioned that thing where the stress just drains away from you. It's the same for me, for example, with music. There's a whole playing guitar and so forth. There's a whole literature on this too. A great book called Flow by a wonderful psychologist, and it's really about what you just said, finding the thing that makes time stop for you, makes time go away, where you could literally spend hours and think you were there for moments.
Yeah.
And it is, I think, essential. And I think there's a lot of times, a lot of kids who haven't found that yet. And another thing that parents can do, certainly in terms of mental health promotion, is expose your kids to everything, all the healthy pursuits.
Take them fishing, take them to this, take them to that, show them this.
Let them find their flow, and then encourage them with everything you've got to keep doing that.
So we got a break here, but give us, that was a lot of negative. Give us some positive sides. What is Compass Health doing? What are you seeing on the positive side that is getting kids through some of these things?
Yeah, so we're obviously big believers in equipping parents, because it has to be their parents and their social network that supports them in these things. So often we see folks get treatment for mental health conditions, and then they go right back into a circumstance that created it, and it kind of doesn't go well. Right. The outcomes aren't good. But so supporting parents, supporting the social networks, getting the word out, doing social psychosocial education, as we call it, making sure that folks are aware of all the strategies they can do to help support their kids and the folks that they love that have mental health challenges.
What about drugs? Drugs have always been a big part of this, and it seems like, again, I don't know anything, that things are overprescribed and or underprescribed both at the same time.
Yep, you'll get differing opinions from different folks on that. Big believer in appropriate, judicious use of medication. I always go back to my first psychopharmacology class in graduate school. The professor, who was a psychiatrist, said, never forget that pharmacology is just a sub-branch of toxicology. So it's all poison. So it's just a matter of making sure that you prescribe it in the most conservative and helpful way possible and not overprescribe. I do believe there's a whole lot of people in this country who are the whole issue of so-called polypharmacy. They just have so many medications. I did a study years ago before I came to Compass. We looked at, for example, older folks who were in our psychiatric unit, and they were being prescribed on average 15 medications, 15 on average, which means many of them had 20 or more. So, how in the world do you proceed with life when you're so pumped full
How
of...
does your body know what's going on?
And you're, as my friend Larry Halverson, Dr. Halverson used to say, if once you get past the first maybe 2 or 3 medications, you're way beyond the science. There's no studies on the impact of all 4 or 5 or 6 medications altogether. That's just not how research works.
Compass Health is here. We're talking mental health. Dr. Paul Thomlinson here in studio. A couple of text messages we'll take. Text your comments to 84126. And it's a mental health show, so be nice, okay, and ask your question. Dr. Paul Thomlinson back in studio in a moment here on the Big 550. We're talking mental health. Today's a mental health break. Talking about mental health going on here with Dr. Paul Thomlinson. He's in studio, Executive Director of the Compass Health Research Institute. From the John Beale text line, text your comments and your questions to 84126. Does Compass Health provide family counseling?
We do indeed. We have a bunch of folks who are skilled, credentialed, and trained in family therapy, and we can make sure when we do the assessment that you get connected with folks who have those skills, for sure.
When talking about children, let's stay on children for a while. We can sort of branch out to adults in a minute. But what are some of the things parents should look for that says, my kid's struggling, my kid's having a hard time, I need some help?
Yeah. So it's kind of the same answer for adults and kids in a way. And I'm going to go back to Sigmund Freud, Uncle Siggy. He wasn't right about everything. In fact, he was wrong about a lot of things. But I think he was right about what mental health looks like, which is the ability to love and work. So if you find your kid who's not connecting, that's the love part. They just don't seem themselves in terms of their ability to connect with their friends or with you as a parent. Changes in those kinds of relationships. That's obviously a warning sign, and to me the most serious one when they start to withdraw, isolate, etc. And their ability to work. And for kids, that means, of course, school or play activities or whatever. If those things just aren't working for them, if they're not really engaging and they don't seem to find the joy, the pleasure, the normal stuff that kids can get engaged with, then it may be time to look at getting an assessment.
There's a teenage-itis, right? The teenagers sort of pull away from their parents.
For sure.
So there's a certain normalcy in that.
Yes.
But you're saying that there's something else there.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right. You hit on a really good point, which is, the developmental arc for kids is such that, the adolescent years, what's normal for adolescence is very abnormal, if you will, statistically speaking, from the rest of the lifespan in some ways, because they do tend to become more isolated, tend to withdraw a bit. And there's some really healthy things about that as they're processing, finding out who they are, establishing their sense of identity. That's one of the big challenges of mental health for the whole life is really individuating, as they call it, finding out who you are and being that person. So that's all very normal. But even during that phase, again, it's about extremity. When they've done it for longer, when they're staying in their room for days on end, it seems like, rather than just isolating for a few hours at a time. It's really a matter of degree.
Yeah. Often people talk about self-medicating with drugs or alcohol, and I've always been confused by that. How does the person know? Explain self-medicating, and I know it manifests itself in social. Mental health is a big part of abusing alcohol, drugs, marijuana, cocaine, fentanyl, however you want to talk about it. But talk about the side of self-medicating for a second.
Glad you brought it up. It's a really important issue, and hasten to add that Compass has fantastic substance use treatment services. Really skilled folks and compassionate folks in that vein. But self-medication really is just what it sounds like, which is when folks begin to have mental health challenges, they're feeling depressed, they're feeling anxious, they're looking for some strategies, looking for some way to change their state of mind. And, alcohol and other drugs. And remember, alcohol is a drug. It's in many ways one of the most dangerous drugs. But folks are looking to change their state of mind. So they engage in all kinds of problem solving. That's all it is. They're trying to solve a problem. And unfortunately, it works for a little bit. Self-medicating with alcohol, for example, works really well. Whiskey will knock the edge off for a little while, but overall, over the long run, of course, it's a really self-defeating strategy. But it really is about changing their state of mind, helping them get through whatever the emotional, mental health challenges that they're experiencing is. But here's the thing I think it's really fascinating. Gabor Mate, one of my heroes, a psychiatrist, says all drugs of abuse, including alcohol, either distract from pain or treat pain. And you think about it, that's really true. Whether it's opioids or alcohol or Xanax or whatever, they're there to distract from pain or to treat pain. All drugs of abuse. And so the question isn't why the abuse. I mean, that's obvious. The self-medication. Why the self-medication? But the question is, where's the pain coming from? Because that's what they're doing. They're trying to solve the problem of pain, and the pain could be physical. There's obviously folks with chronic pain who end up abusing long term, but it's also many times it's emotional. It's coming from a dysfunctional family, not having a sense of connection, not having a repertoire of behavioral strategies that help them solve the problem of how to connect with other people and how to get through their life for the next day. So they numb themselves with alcohol and other drugs, etc. So the question is always, where's the pain coming from? And that's where I think therapy can help a lot, because sometimes we need an objective perspective on what's happening in our life. We need to lay it all out for somebody who has the compassion and the skills to be able to say, look, I'm not sure you're aware, but here's the pattern I'm seeing in the way you're thinking and how you're connecting with your family system, for example. And here's maybe some strategies that could help you feel better in terms of changing the way you see yourself and the way you see your place in your family system, the way you see yourself in the world, et cetera. So self-medication is really about achieving the same goal that we have in therapy, which is solving a problem. Yeah. But unfortunately, it's a really bad strategy.
But with drugs, though, first you have to deal with the physical addiction of it, right? Yeah, I mean, once you're numbing the pain, but now your brain and your body craves it, so you have to get over that part of it, and then you have to deal with why you were doing it in the first place.
Correct. And we talked about polypharmacy before. I think it's true whether you're talking about illicit drugs or alcohol or prescribed medications. There's a sense in which the first thing you need to do is, and again, I'm not recommending folks go off of prescribed medications. It's something they need to check with their physician on. But there's a detox process. Whatever the addiction is, there's a detox process that needs to happen so that they can clear their body, clear their mind, and really develop more healthy coping strategies moving forward.
Well, and then of course you get into the whole. That you're a drug addict and they lock you up and they throw away the key or some variation of criminality.
Oh, good Lord!
When you need mental health, you don't need jail. You need mental health.
If there's anything more stigmatized than mental health, it's probably substance use.
Right.
I mean, it's like incredible the way I hear people talk about folks who are addicted or struggle with addiction issues. I mean, they're dehumanized in ways that are just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I mean, these are people. These are human beings. These are your kids, your uncles, your husband, your wife, and they are human beings first. And so one of the things we try to do, one of the things that Compass does, and I think the mental health community tries to do, is use so-called person-first language. And let's stop calling them addicts. They're a human being. That's a person with a substance use issue. They're a person trying to solve a problem, and they need help.
Yeah.
They need treatment. They don't need to be incarcerated. You cannot incarcerate people out of addiction. I mean, that's a horrible and expensive strategy. You throw a lot of time and money after it, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
Yeah, and also the stigma. I've had parents whose children have died of a heroin overdose who don't want to admit it, because they're embarrassed by it. Think about that for a second, right? So you're dealing with this pain of your child dying, and you're embarrassed because you wouldn't be embarrassed if they were in a car crash, right? Exactly. I mean, it's just heartbreaking.
It is.
This stigma is there.
Right, and you, again, put your finger right on it, and it's kind of what we're talking about before we came on about normalizing the conversation. The most important thing we can do, I think, is normalize struggle. Let's talk about it out loud in front of God and everybody. Normalize struggle. We all struggle, and the more you try to put a happy face on that, the more you become inauthentic and disingenuous. And we need to be able to talk about it. And I wrote a little song called "Struggle Bus Blues," and it talks about that. There's always a seat right next to me on the struggle bus.
Right.
Come sit. Let's talk about it. because we're all on the struggle bus.
Dr. Paul Thomlinson, our guest. A couple more text lines are coming in. Executive Director of Compass Health Research Institute. More with him in a moment. Let's talk John Beal Roofing. 1-800-NEW-ROOF, 1-800-NEW-ROOF, or johnbealroofing.com. Roofing, tuck pointing, siding, gutters, you name it. John Beal Roofing can help you out. John Beal Roofing, guarantee you the best price. Work with your insurance company. What do you need to know? John Beal Roofing. Also, let's talk Stewart. It's Stewart's American Mortgage, because Stewart is great. What Stewart will do is Stewart will have a mortgage for you, and he will have no fees. Let's talk about that for a second. No fees, because Stewart will have no fees. Anything over $200,000. You go somewhere else, they'll charge you $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 in fees. Now, I've been advertising for Stewart for 7, 8 years now, and there are people who still don't believe that. Well, what's the catch? Well, guess what? There is no catch. 7 years, 8 years. He's now the biggest mortgage banker in the state of Missouri for a reason, because everyone realizes he's not charging you any fees. So you want to go somewhere else and be charged $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 in closing costs, or call Stewart. And you get no fees. You also get a little bit better interest rate. You also he can close you in 10 days if you need to close in 10 days, or you need to refinance the house you're in. Stewart at Stewart's American Mortgage. Google the bagel loan if you remember nothing else. 314-324-4440 or stewartsamc.com. Thomlinson, our guest. Lots of great responses from the text line. A couple of questions, though, from the text line. Dr. Paul Thomlinson, Executive Director of Compass Health. Medicare, Medicaid, insurance, are you guys covered by all those?
You bet. We accept all those. Major Medicaid provider, but yeah, we're on many insurance panels, and we have amazing folks who will help you figure out the whole payment situation.
Compass Health from Kansas City to St. Louis. You mentioned 48 counties.
Ish. Yeah, maybe 49 now.
Yeah, we were talking off the air. I'm sure you see different people in rural counties than you see in urban areas.
Right. And we are, again, St. Louis area. We are in Columbia, Jeff City, Kansas City area. But we're also in tiny little towns all over the place and rural areas where they have to drive 20 miles to come to an office, et cetera. And you're right. We see kind of different things. Rural America, rural Missouri, the culture of rugged individualism, as you said, put some dirt on it and walk it off. But they are behind the eight ball in a lot of ways with uncertainty in terms of, especially farmers, et cetera. But rurality itself can be a risk factor because of, the very definition of it is geographic dispersion and so forth. But And I mentioned before, I believe one of the root causes for much of the mental health epidemic is also the loneliness and social isolation epidemic. We have never, ever been good at being alone. Human beings aren't wired for it. We're by way of genetics or evolution. We're just not. And that's much more of a risk factor. We also, for example, in rural Missouri, we're really proud to be a partner with Missouri Foundation for Health for our firearm suicide prevention grant program. Looking at how do we, in a culture where guns are extremely prevalent and well accepted, et cetera, and available, how do we do a better job of making folks safe from especially suicide by firearm, which is the most common method and the most deadly?
Yeah, I want to talk suicide in the last couple minutes. Suicide. We're seeing it in record numbers.
Yes. In
veterans.
Yes.
In seniors, in middle age, in children. Yes. It is truly an epidemic.
Yep.
What do you say? What are you seeing? Talk to that for a moment.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking, and one thing folks need to know is that a single suicide impacts hundreds of people, not a few like we used to maybe think, but it impacts hundreds of people in devastating ways, and the downstream ripple effect, so forth. But the bottom line is the best model of suicide I know of really talks about it's a function of lack of belonging, number one, a sense of burdensome, being a burden, number two, and also being capable of engaging with lethal means. Those are the three big things. What does that mean? if you're not connected to people, and I keep beating that drum because I don't think there's anything more important. There's no stronger medicine than human connection. And if you don't feel like you have a place where you can be you can belong, you can feel comfortable, all those things you talked about in terms of bullying, if you don't have a safe space where people, where everybody knows your name and they got your back, that's a real risk factor for suicidality. But burdensomeness, another huge issue. Feeling like the net effect of your existence on the planet is to be a burden to other people. I'm what's called a suicide psychological autopsy investigator. I can't tell you the number of cases I've reviewed where that was so clear that they believed they were doing the world a favor by taking themselves out of it. And, of course, we all know the downstream effects of that, which are devastating. So sense of belonging, we got to do more to help kids, to help ourselves, to help people we love feel like they have a place, that they matter to us and to other people. A sense of burdensomeness, that they're not, that we would do anything for them and we counted nothing. And then being aware of lethal means.
Let's talk about this suicide hotline number.
Yeah, so we're also proud to have been part of the rollout of the national 988 number. So think of 911. So you were quick, what's the number for 911? Now it's quick, what's the number for 988? That's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline that connects you with skilled resources. If you're in a crisis, you can call that number anytime, 24/7, and get connected to resources.
Just dial 988.
Literally 988.
That's it.
Yeah, and the analog being like 911. This is the mental health 911, 988.
Yeah.
Also want to mention we have in Wentzville and several other locations around the state, we have something we're also really proud of, which is our crisis access points, CAPS, where folks can go anytime, 24/7, 365. If you're experiencing a mental health crisis, if you need to come in and get assessed, get connected, go to the hospital, go get connected to physician services or to mental health services, if you need to come in and take a shower and have a meal, these are places you can do that. And we've seen about 7,000 people now at these in less than a year. And we're finding that they stay, for an example, on average anywhere between 8 and 12 hours. And we're really connecting folks with the resources that they need in the community. Many times folks are just at the end of the rope. That's a place for them to find a way to tie a knot and hang on another day and get connected.
So there's a number here. Call this number for any one of these mental health services, and they can triage you and put you in the right place?
Correct.
1-844-853-8937?
You got it.
That's the phone number.
Yep.
1-844-853-8937. Is there a website to find out more?
CompassHealthNetwork.org.
CompassHealthNetwork.org.
If you like my voice, there's all kinds of videos of me doing podcasts about mental health promotion on there. But CompassHealthNetwork.org will give you the lay of the land with respect to our services.
And then 988 is that National Suicide Prevention line. That's it, just 988.
988.
We'll
Three
get you
digits.
to somebody to talk to. And that phone number again, 1-844-853-8937. I'll leave you with this, Dr. Paul Thomlinson with Compass Health. I was watching an interview not too long ago with Howard Stern and Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
And the two of them are at the top of their profession. Hundreds of millions of dollars, adored by millions of fans. And the two of them were having a conversation of what they learned in therapy. So explain that to me. I mean, right? If it's good enough for Bruce Springsteen and Howard Stern to go to therapy, it's probably not a bad idea for all of us to get a little mental health along the way.
100%. Man, it doesn't matter your circumstances. You always have room to improve what's going on between your ears, and that makes all the difference in terms of your life outcome. So, yeah, if it's good enough for the boss, it's good enough for me.
Right? I mean, it's just great. The two of them, and they were talking some interesting sort of what they experienced and what they dealt with and how they dealt with what was happening to them and around them. And
I really appreciate those kind of conversations too, because again, that's part of the normalizing.
Yeah.
Normalizing struggle. It happens to everybody. We all need support. We all need help. Every one of us.
Dr. Paul Tomlinson, thank you for coming in. It was good stuff.
My pleasure, man.
Yeah,
Thanks for
really,
having me.
really, really interesting stuff. 9:55 here, Big 550 KTRS. We should all appreciate and take a step back, deep breath, and realize that the people you're mad at are having a bad day just like you are, and always better to be nicer to somebody than not nice to them. So 9:56 here, Big 550 KTRS. Outdoor living, real quick. Pat Leahy, one of the good ones. The deck, the fence, the gazebo not working. You don't have one. You want to get one. Outdoor living is where you want to go. Pat Leahy has a showroom Big Bend and I-44 in Kirkwood. It's an old Denny's. Looks like an old Denny's. Go in there and see for yourself. They've got composite decking. They got metal framing. They've got all the bells and whistles. You can pick and choose what type of fence and deck and gazebo, and you like this wood with that color and everything else. Outdoor Living's been doing it since the mid-'90s. They are the best. They've built a couple of decks for me. They're in the process of designing something new. They have a great design eye. And everything they build will last a lifetime because they use that metal framing and that composite decking. The wood, the pressure-treated wood today doesn't last 5-10 years. So you're going to build something, then you're going to have to rebuild it 10 years from now. Not at Outdoor Living. They build it once, and you don't have to worry about it. 314-966-3325 or OutdoorLivingInc.com. That's it. We're done. Heidi and Josh come your way next, and we are back tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.